we can't talk about reducing air pollution without talking about congestion. So as long as we're at the Museum of Natural History, let us talk about the elephant in the room, congestion pricing. There's no escaping the costs of congestion on our streets in all 5 boroughs. But the costs may be hidden, but they're real costs. Our child asthma rates, as I said before, are way above the national average. Congestion isn't the only cause, but we can't pretend it's not a significant factor. It is. Congestion also leads to higher costs for consumers and businesses because deliveries cost more than they would, and people who can't use mass transit decide not to come into the city. And who wants to wait in traffic for hours? Congestion wastes fuel, which fuels global warming. And of course, it wastes time. Time we could be spending working or with our families or going to a park. As the city continues to grow, the cost of congestion to our health, to our economy, and to our environment are only going to get worse. The question is not whether we want to pay, but how do we want to pay? With an increased asthma rate? With more greenhouse gases? Wasted time? Lost business and higher prices? Or do we charge a modest fee to encourage more people to take mass transit? Now, I've thought about this question a lot, and I understand the hesitation about charging a fee. I was a skeptic myself, but I looked at the facts, and that's what I'm asking New Yorkers to do. And the fact is, in cities like London and Singapore, fees succeeded in reducing congestion and improving air quality. The question is, do we want that? Also remember, many people are already paying to drive into Manhattan. There are tolls on most bridges and the 4 tunnels. But to avoid these tolls, many people drive through neighborhood streets. That only clogs the streets, but it increases air pollution and asthma rates. And why should commuters from the Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, and Brooklyn, and from the northern, eastern, and western suburbs all pay different tolls? By charging a flat fee, we can eliminate these disparities because tolls would be deductible against a charge. That means that commuters using Easy Pass to the Queens Midtown Tunnel and the Triborough Bridge and the Henry Hudson Bridge and the Lincoln and Holland tunnels would all pay the same amount. And so would commuters taking the Brooklyn, Williamsburg, and Queensboro bridges. They're all going to be going to the same place. Why shouldn't they all be treated equally? In setting the fee, I've thought about this a lot, and there's no magic number. But it has to be high enough to encourage more people to switch to mass transit, and low enough not to break the bank for businesses and those who have to drive. Based on thorough analysis and the experience of other cities, we believe that an $8 charge would achieve those goals. There are many different ways this system would work and could work in New York City. As a test run, we will seek state authority for a 3-year pilot project, and we're very optimistic that in working with state officials, we will secure hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding for it. The federal government really does want to be helpful, and there's an enormous amount of money that we think they will send to New York to help us implement a program that will make New York better. Cars traveling south of 86th Street would be charged $8, but those who traveled only within the zone would pay half price. Most New Yorkers would not be affected at all, actually. And it's not just because the vast majority don't drive to work. We believe a fee should apply only weekdays from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you drive into Manhattan during the other 12 hours or on a weekend, there'd be no charge. And if you're below 86th Street, rest assured, you're not going to have to pay for the great privilege of moving your car across the street on alternate side parking days. In addition, even during the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. time period, there'd be no charge for using the FDR or the West Side Highway, so that people in Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx could still use those highways free of charge, whether they're heading to Yankee Stadium or the Holland Tunnel. Even those who would take taxis won't be affected, because taxis would be exempt. In analyzing congestion pricing, we studied commuting patterns across the city, and we arrived at an astounding finding. Of the New Yorkers who work in Manhattan, only 5% commute by car. Just think about that, only 5%. And that's why we estimate that city drivers will pay only a little more than half of these congestion pricing fees. Drivers from outside the city will pay the balance. And we know that convincing this 5% will be particularly hard because right now many feel they don't have good mass transit options. It's not that transit doesn't exist. In fact, in every neighborhood in all 5 boroughs, the majority of Manhattan-bound commuters do indeed take a subway, bus, or commuter train. But we know that service to many areas is not what it should be. And that's why, before implementing congestion pricing, we'll implement a range of mass transit improvements to the least served neighborhoods. That means that if you're among the 5% of residents who commute to Manhattan by car, you'll benefit either from better bus service or faster commutes and fewer headaches. And the other 95% of New Yorkers will benefit not only from less congestion on the roads in all 5 boroughs and cleaner air and faster buses, but also with the revenue generated from congestion pricing from new investments in mass transit. It really is a win-win-win when you think about it. And that's something we definitely need. It's not just that the